We are incredibly excited to be helping the British National Strategic Fund navigate one of its biggest challenges yet. So how do we do it? Let's start here. Our investment strategy has 3 phases. Phase 1 focuses on stabilization post-Brexit. One of the UK's most urgent priorities is to make the transition as smooth as possible. So we support industries that are most severely impacted by Brexit, such as financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, and retail. In Phase 2, we focus on advancement and internally strengthen the UK. To do that, we invest in industries such as transportation infrastructure and local businesses to reduce structural unemployment and income inequalities. Phase 3 focuses on future-proofing. We prepare the UK for a sustainable future by investing in technology and renewables. 3 phases to ensure the British National Strategic Fund's success. But before we get into more detail about each one of these phases, what makes our strategy different? First, we are data-driven. Our portfolio is optimized, stress-tested, and backed by the numbers. Second, we are geography sensitive. We make sure no region is left behind through our support for local employers, improvements to transportation infrastructure, and investments in education and growth industries to support struggling economies. Third, we are impact-driven, not buzzword-driven. Our recommendations are backed by thorough research, and we invest only when there is proven scope for measurable social and economic impact. Let's now look at each one of our phases, starting with Phase 1, stabilization. In Phase 1, we sought to determine how Brexit could impact UK firms, and we determined 5 channels in which it could do so. We then benchmarked all sectors to see the ones that would be most severely impacted by Brexit, but also to see which ones are most important to the UK from the perspective of contribution to employment and to GDP. Based on these criteria, we determined financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, and retail were the sectors we would invest in. We then sought to determine which investment instruments would be most appropriate. We like public equities because of their liquidity and their potential to drive impact for voting rights. We invest in corporate bonds because they offer the possibility to inject capital in the UK's largest companies, which are also its largest employers. We invest in private equity and private debt to support small to medium enterprises while also seeking higher returns, and we invest in government bonds to diversify and mitigate risk. We used CAPM returns and estimated the shrunk variance-covariance matrix for our investments and used mean variance optimization to arrive to our portfolio weights. That gave us an expected return of 7% and a Sharpe ratio of 0.96. In Phase 2, we wanted to focus on advancement and strengthening the UK from within. So we looked at what were the main challenges in the UK, and specifically, we wanted to focus on structural unemployment and income inequality. So we looked at the regions where unemployment was the highest, and we determined that all these regions, with the exception of London, were focused on manufacturing. So we decided to invest in profitable local manufacturing businesses to help support employment, but also to invest in education infrastructure to reskill the labor for more profitable industries. We also looked at the regions with lowest GDP per capita, and we noticed that these were the regions that were most isolated from a transportation infrastructure perspective. So we decided to invest in land transportation infrastructure to give lower GDP per capita regions better access to consumer markets, supply markets, and job markets. In Phase 2, we got an expected return of 6.8% and a Sharpe ratio of 0.87. Our last phase is future-proofing. We looked for industries of the future economy which already had strong foundations and promising capabilities within the UK. That motivated us to invest in fintech, which already accounts for over 76,000 jobs and enjoys a strong adoption rate of 42%. It also motivated us to invest in clean energy, which is an industry that will be bolstered by the fact that the UK government is investing £10 billion in clean energy infrastructure. Finally, we invested in tech, as the UK is already one of Europe's most important tech hubs, given it hosts 26 out of the 68 European unicorns and 1,000 AI firms. In phase 3, we introduced a new asset class, which is venture capital, as we believe that this asset class is well suited to support innovation in the UK. In phase 3, our expected return is 7.8% and our Sharpe ratio is 0.98. To recap, here is how our investment strategy might look like in absolute terms. The $20 billion received at the beginning of phase 2 are allocated to new investments in the asset classes defined in phase 1, which give the overall portfolio the optimal weights calculated. The $10 billion received at the beginning of phase 3 are allocated to new investments, such that the total amount allocated to each asset class increases or stays constant. It should be noted, however, that our strategy implies some rotation in and out of some sectors within public equities. Let's now see how our investment strategy scores against the demands of our stakeholders. We supported declining industry, local firms, and small to and medium enterprises in phase 2 when we invested in local manufacturing industries. We helped create new specialized giants and improved the Gini ratio in phases 2 and 3 when we invested in education infrastructure, technology, and renewables. We invested in infrastructure projects in phase 2, with in particular UK motorways and high-speed train lines. We promoted international business in phases 1, 2, and 3, where we allocated 14% of our portfolio to international equities. We invested in local enterprises with room for investment in phase 2, and we prioritized VC investments in phase 3 when we invested in fintechs and clean energy projects. To conclude, let's see how we delivered on our triple mandate. Our first mandate was to support economic stability, growth, and self-sufficiency in the UK. We did this in phase 1 where we ensured stability by targeting the sectors most destabilized by Brexit. In phase 2, we provided a stronger foundation to the UK economy through an improved transportation infrastructure system. In phase 3, we positioned the UK for the future economy by supporting high growth and sustainable industries. Our second mandate was to address socioeconomic issues, particularly income inequality and unemployment. We did this in phase 1 when we focused on the UK's largest employer industries. In phase 2, we supported businesses in high unemployment regions and invested in education infrastructure to reskill the workforce. In phase 3, we invested in technology and renewables, which cultivate specialized skills and work across the country. Investments in renewables also contribute to the long-term well-being of the British population. Finally, our third mandate was to generate returns corresponding to the 30-year gilt yield plus a 2% premium. In our third phase, we achieved an expected return of 7.8% with a Sharpe ratio of 0.98. To achieve this, we constructed a diversified portfolio across different asset classes, geographies, and sectors. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to answering your questions.